Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button if you guys are enjoying the content that we're throwing up. And make sure you guys hit the like button if you enjoy the video. And yeah, let's begin. Okay, so after what seems like an eternity of waiting, the War of Realms has finally begun, and it's just like, oh my god, dude. Okay, I'm gonna say right now, and I don't care what anybody says. Jason Aaron's run on Thor is the greatest run on Thor there's ever been, and there's no arguing that point. That's just the way it is. I've been reading Thor since Dan Jurgens started writing it in the 1990s. Like, I've been reading Thor for a long time, and like the run of Jason Aaron is the best run. Like, it's definitively the best run. So basically, all the realms are in shambles right now. Literally, Midgard, which is basically Earth, is like the only realm that's not on the brink of total destruction, right? Like, this is the whole basis behind War of Realms. So for those people who haven't really kept up with anything, the way this works is you basically have Malekith the Accursed. He's a dark elf, and he's been around for a long time. Really, the first big campaign he went on was when he got his hands on the Casket of Ancient Winters back in the day. But the idea here is that what Malekith had basically been doing was launching this onslaught on like all of the realms that are out there, right? Like Jotunheim and all that stuff, you know, Niflheim and everything. And basically, like, essentially either conquered them all or killed almost everybody there. But essentially, like, they're all just like derelict spaces now is really all they are. Everybody who's worth anything has either been killed or they fled as refugees. Not only that, for Asgard itself, it's been torn asunder. And we know that because all that happened as a result of Mangog, right? Like, that was the whole basis behind the Mangog story, that Mangog was unleashed. And when that happened, like, being one of the only beings that like Odin fears, that Odin's actually like the only thing that Odin's actually afraid of, Mangog basically stormed Asgard and just wrecked everything, destroyed the Bifrost Bridge, almost killed Odin. Like, all the various Asgardians who normally reside here have left and gone to Earth because it's the only safe haven. And so it makes sense when Odin, being the only person residing on Asgard now, is basically met by the arrival of the Dark Elves, who take him out pretty easily. Now, there's a reason why this happens, because at the outset, like for those who aren't really sure, who haven't really been keeping up, at the outset, it would be like, well, Odin's way too powerful to be killed by Dark Elves, and that's true under normal circumstances. But do not forget, Mangog took almost all the power of Odin to basically hold at bay, let alone be like defeated by Jane Foster. Like, it was the last major story arc for her character. So the Odin force is readily depleted at the moment. Like, it's almost non-existent. There's a little bit left, but not enough for Odin to really do anything with, otherwise he would have fixed Asgard. And so with him being in such a weakened state, he's taken out pretty quickly. And so what this does is it switches over to Thor. Now, the cool thing about this, with Thor being in New York alongside a lot of the other Asgardians kind of spread across the world, that what this does is it leads to the arrival of Loki. Now, Loki's been kind of like a wild card throughout the whole War of Realms, right? Like, in the beginning of the War of Realms, it seemed like he was kind of an agent, like he was a double agent. He was working on behalf of Malekith, but while Malekith wasn't really aware of it, was actually working for his mom, only for us to find out he was just kind of pursuing his own goals and was legitimately sided with Malekith. And so when that happened, like, he stabbed his mom in the back and she was, you know, basically unconscious for a while, things like that, and it kind of allowed Jane Foster to do her own thing. What we end up having to come to grips with here, and the same thing that Thor has to deal with, is the answer to the question, whose side is Loki really on? It's the one question nobody really seems to be able to answer. No one knows whose side Loki's on, because Loki could be on anybody's side. But with Loki showing up here, essentially like injured in such an extreme degree, almost on the verge of death, the response of Thor is, take me to where Malekith is. Because the idea behind Odin's son here is that, like, okay, so one, he's wielding 3 hammers, which is pretty awesome, but literally, like, he's let's talk about that for a second. Thor wielding 3 hammers. That is amazing. That's one of the things I love about Jason Aaron's run, right? Like, during God of Thunder, he had like 2 hammers and like the Necro Sword. But nonetheless, it's pretty insane in this this little bit of storytelling here. But Thor's whole stance is, this war starts with Malekith. Thor has to be the one to defeat him. Now, the reality of the situation is that Malekith is not someone who can be easily defeated by Thor, because Malekith has all manner of like, you know, mystic arts and things like that at his disposal. So it's not like Thor can just run up on him and hit him with a hammer, you know, cock him over the head one good time, and that's the end of that. It doesn't really work that way. There's a better chance of defeating Malekith with Thor than without Thor. And that's literally what he says, is like, take me to Malekith. He's the one that started all this. I know that we lost the Bifrost, but Malekith has the ability to basically open his own portals to give his people access to different locations. Take me to Malekith and I will wipe him out. Like, I will destroy him. Now, the funny thing about it is that for the way that Jason Aaron writes this, it really almost kind of hits on the head that, like, Loki cannot teleport anywhere he wants, which is actually not true. Over the years in Marvel Comics, it's kind of been established that Loki has access to these different back doors to different dimensions. The way this works when it comes to accessing dimensions is technically there's the front door, which is like the direction most people take, right? Like the Bifrost is like the front door to a different dimension. Loki knows the back doors. He can sneak in and out of these different places without anybody ever really realizing he was there. But in the way it's written here, it almost seems like he can't. Now, this could also be the fact that like one of the things that Malekith did is cut off people's access to that realm, which is entirely possible, but it's not really stated here. It's just the Bifrost is gone. We can't access those realms. And so again, it seems to limit the idea that like, even if Loki can teleport in and out of those places, that Thor cannot go with him. It's kind of a weird situation because it seems to kind of contradict a lot of the established history when it comes to Loki and the places he's able to access. But at the end of the day, the statement's made, you know how to get in and out of these places by accessing the kind of backdoor Bifrost that Malekith uses. Take me to where he's at. And when that happens, Loki's basically whisked away to Jotunheim, which is where Malekith is not. And immediately Thor picks up on that. Malekith is not here. And so with that being the case, the response of Thor is, there's no way Malekith is here. Take me to where he's at. And the response of Loki is, I already have, only for us to find out that Malekith is masquerading as Loki. Now, this is a very important thing here, and the reason why is because it really hits the nail on the head of just how capable Malekith is. And that's one of the reasons why the War of Realms is so cool, is because in a lot of ways, Malekith is a pretty obscure character to the non-comic book reader, and even to some of the normal comic book readers as well, right? Like, if I walk up to somebody who's been reading Marvel Comics or reading DC Comics for 5 years, and I show them a picture of Malekith, they probably won't know who he is. But when you go through and you look at like the lengthy history of his character, he's very Loki-esque in regard to how he functions. And that's what makes Malekith so cool, is because what better way to lure Thor away than to basically portray himself as Loki? Not because Thor would ally himself with Loki, but because, again, Loki knows all the backdoor channels. Loki is the best way by which Thor can immediately access Malekith and take him out. And that's the one thing Thor wants the most, is to eliminate Malekith. And so that's why this is so cool, and that's why it works so well. Because then what happens is it's essentially just like this giant battle between Thor and these frost giants. Now, the battle itself largely takes place off panel. Instead, what we do is we switch over to New York, and we basically have Spider-Man just kind of swinging about and doing his own thing. But then he's basically met by the arrival of Lady Freya. Now, again, all these Asgardians that previously existed in the realm of Asgard have taken up refuge on Earth, since it's like one of the only safe places. But one of the things that I also want you guys to notice here, and Jason Aaron hasn't really said it to us so much as he's shown it to us, but one of the things that Malekith has done is save Midgard for last. And the reason why is because Earth is home to some very, very, very powerful people. And so it'd be foolish for Malekith to initiate the War of Realms and then seek Earth as his first place to conquer, because Malekith has been defeated on Earth on more than one occasion. And so it makes sense that if he's going to attack Earth, save it as the last realm, and then in turn like amass this gigantic army and then send it there. And so that's one of the reasons why he kind of waited until the very end. But with Spider-Man showing up here and basically encountering Lady Freya, it's actually sort of a funny little encounter here. She calls him like the man of spiders. And it's interesting because she's like, my son has told me a lot about you, but I didn't really believe the colorful aspects, but I guess it's all true. But the cool thing about this is that from the perspective of Freya, one of the things to bear in mind is that while she hasn't visited Earth all that often, she's well aware of the exploits of Thor on Earth. And so when she encounters Spider-Man, she knows just by the virtue of what Thor has been telling her that he's not someone to be trifled with. And even if he's not the weakest or not the strongest person on Earth, he's certainly somebody who will do whatever it takes to win. And he'll keep fighting because he's an honorable warrior. This is the kind of thing that Thor communicates to the Asgardians there. And so that's why when Hildegard and like when Lady Sif show up, when Jane Foster shows up, that like Hildegard's just like, there's a giant spider thing here. Let's kill it before it deposits its eggs in us, and so on and so forth. Sif's response is, no, it's just a superhero on Earth, because again, Sif has dealings with Earthlings. For Freya, her response here is, I'm not really worried about Spider-Man. That's the least of our concerns. The realms are all collapsing. The realms are all falling. They're literally being laid waste to one by one by Malekith. And in fact, they're all pretty much conquered. Asgard is really no more. There's no safe haven left. The War of Realms is coming here because there's no place else for it to go. And it's kind of like this all hands on deck situation, the way that Jason Aaron does it, because you jump from Doctor Strange, you jump from Daredevil, you jump to Wolverine, you jump to the Punisher, you jump to all these different characters who are all realizing something's very wrong, that something's happening here. And literally around the time that happens, the War of Realms manifests in its entirety. And it's a full-blown invasion of New York, from the Frost Giants to the forces of Cinder, who's the replacement for Surtur, for like all these different beings all across the different realms. This massive army amassed by Malekith all just pours into the city of New York. And this is kind of a funny thing here, because the way that Jason Aaron plays this is almost kind of like, hey, so these guys kind of have a chance, but at the same time, you're kind of like, but no, they don't either. There's not enough Incredible Hulks. There's no Thor here. He's on Jotunheim, right? Like there's like, we don't even know what the Sentry's doing. He's out in space somewhere because he's a perfectly blended version of himself in the Void. Like we don't know where he is. He's out there somewhere. Hyperion and the Squadron Supreme, we don't know where they are. Things are popping off, and like all the powerhouses are seemingly nowhere to be seen here. And so of course this calls in the Avengers. It brings in like Carol Danvers, it brings in Iron Man, it brings in Black Panther, you know, Captain America, and all these different guys. But for the most part, like they're a stopgap measure. There's no real way they can win here. It's almost a repeat of the events of Ragnarok, right? Like for those of you guys who remember during the events of Ragnarok for Thor Disassembled, it was literally Loki leading a giant army against Asgard, and everybody died. There was really nobody who could stand against him, and that's what's happening here. You've got Malekith the Accursed, one of the most powerful beings out there. You've got Enchantress, who has insane levels of magical ability. You've got all these different characters, and for the most part, like you've got Captain America, who can run really fast and punch really hard, and he's got a shield. You've got She-Hulk, who's almost the Incredible Hulk, but not really. You've got Black Panther, who can like move really fast, and he's the king of the dead, presumably still. You've got Carol Danvers, who's probably the strongest among all the individuals here. Like you got Spider-Man with a spider sense. You really have no one who can stand against these guys. You know, there's no one here right now who can really do anything with these forces, and that's what happens. They all start getting torn to pieces, and then suddenly you're met with the arrival of Loki, and that's when the tide appears to change. That's when it really seems to shift. But it's kind of a crazy thing here, because when Loki starts starts talking to his mom, when he cuts off the hand of his father, he starts addressing his mom. The idea is, well, I don't trust you, Loki. And Loki's response is, well, I have a way for you to learn to trust me. I have a way for you to show that I'm a genuinely good guy. And what ends up happening is Loki basically sacrifices himself by getting eaten by his father, which is kind of crazy, because then it's like, well, then where do you go from here with Loki? Like what else is there to do? But that's the crazy scenario, is Loki basically said, you have to go find Thor. You have to go locate him. If you guys don't have Thor, there's no way you can win. All of it rests on his shoulders. And that's what's so awesome here, because now what it turns into is kind of a race to rescue Thor. But while all that's going on, when the Hounds of Hell are coming out, when like the Warriors of Heaven are coming out, when you've got like the Queen of Cinders, again, like the leader of Muspelheim, like the new Surtur, like when you've got all these different characters all showing up here, the Earth seems to be doomed. And meanwhile, on Jotunheim, all you have is Thor fighting against what seems to be like this basically endless horde of frost giants that just keeps coming and keeping him sidetracked. But even if he defeats them all, it won't matter, because the Bifrost is gone. There's seemingly no way for Thor to leave Jotunheim. There's no way to get him out of there. Thor's out there by himself, and it seems that for all intents and purposes, Earth is literally going to be conquered. But with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like. One heck of a way to start the War of Realms, and I will catch you all later. Peace.